environments. And I almost sort of shy away from all the kind of big corporate stuff. And anytime there's an opportunity to do something that's more entrepreneurial, more dynamic, and certainly starting up companies. I was very lucky to get involved in the startup of Moet Hennessy Australia, and some of my greatest friends in life, indeed my wife, was involved in the startup of Moet Hennessy Australia with me, along with people who are lifelong friends. And I think through those through those formative periods, those strange times, you create different types of friendships. And I think life's all about the people that you meet and the experiences that you have. And, I think you get that in a startup environment. And I'm loving Fever Tree, North America for the very same reasons. We've got a team coast to coast and up into Canada. And, it's great. I've met some fantastic new people, and already you can feel this very special bond between the people within the team, because they all know that we're involved in doing something quite special and quite different.
And it really is. We're going to get, we'll touch on Fever Tree now, but we'll get back to it. Fever Tree, as a company, sort of set out to disrupt the mixer market, the soda market. Before that, really, it was just a lot of macro sort of rubbish on the market. And mixers have really changed the game. I now have locals and regulars and consumers go, I only use Fever Tree, I only use their tonics, or I only use their ginger beers and stuff like that. How do you sort of kick off something like Fever Tree in North America, where really you're sort of pushing an uphill battle all the time?
Well, I'm not sure it's certainly, look, it's not an uphill battle, but it's certainly a battle, because it's not as if people don't want this, and that's what would make it uphill. People are looking to make the best drinks that they possibly can, and whether that's a bartender, a mixologist, or frankly, your average person at home, they want to make the best drink that they possibly can, either for themselves to enjoy or for their guests, be that at home or in the bar. And so this growth of premium spirits, where people were talking endlessly about, the quality of the spirit and the way that the spirit was amazingly crafted, it resonates so strongly with people. And then suddenly you found that, I always say that the life's work of a distiller gets destroyed literally, 5 seconds before people, are about to have their drink. And why does it get destroyed? It gets destroyed because somebody injects it with a whole load of high fructose corn syrup and artificial ingredients, and destroys this beautiful spirit. And ultimately, like anything in life, a meal is only as good as its worst ingredient. A drink is only as good as its worst ingredient. You'd never put, tomato ketchup on Wagyu beef, would you? So why are you putting, syrups and artificial ingredients into a beautifully crafted, delicious, amazing spirit? And for us, it's just about telling that story. And when you say to people, if 3/4 of your drink is the mixer, why are you not giving it at least equal importance? You just watch the penny dropping inside people's head. You watch the penny drop, and they go, I hadn't thought of that. And I think that's the genius of Fever Tree. It was something that people hadn't thought of, and yet is so, frankly, blindingly obvious once you give it some thought. You go, yep. And that's how I came into the business. I mean, I came into the business because Fever Tree made Belvedere vodka taste great. It helped me with my marketing. It made my drinks taste better. But that's all we were after.
Well, it's a perfect segue. So I'm a bit of a comic book nerd. I usually start off my interviews always. I'm a bit of a hardcore comic book. What's your origin story? You're in the military. We talked off camera about my father was an ex-military man himself. What sort of kicked you off to? Because it's a weird transition. We can talk about your military career, but how did you transition from that to the spirits business? What was the aha moment? Were you always an entrepreneurial kid? And then you just need some structure, because I know my father went into the military because it was either that or juvenile prison. So
I don't think I was quite juvenile prison, but I probably were. No, but I think it was, look, there's no doubt, I loved that military experience, loved the discipline it gave me. I wasn't patient enough to go to college. I'm probably one of the last generations that could afford not to go to college, as it were. I certainly wouldn't be recommending to my kids or anybody else not to go to college and get a secondary education. But I was a young, active, passionate, engaged young man, and I just wanted to get out there and attack the world. And the army basically brought me down to earth and allowed me to do that, but do it in a disciplined and structured manner. But equally, after a time, and there's a weird thing in the army where you can grow very, very quickly when you're junior, and then you get to a certain ceiling, and then they start capping you, and then you can like move 1 or 2 steps every 5 years. And that just the prospect of that frustrated me. So I was a captain at the age of 23, having joined the army, just 18, 19. I was young, and then they said, right, you can be a major when you're, I don't know, 28, and you can be a lieutenant colonel when you're 35. And you're like, so I can do 2 more steps, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I always used to joke with people that, as soon as the Berlin Wall came down, of course, we defeated communism. So therefore it was a good time to leave. But I literally left exactly at that time. And the one thing I knew I wanted to do was I wanted to work in something that was tangible. I couldn't work in insurance, or I couldn't work it had to be tangible, and I had to believe in it. And I love the alcohol industry because it's fundamentally about people relaxing and people enjoying themselves and people having fun. I can't get quite as excited about soap powder or, toothpaste or whatever. So it had to be tangible, but it had to also be something I could engage with. And what I love about this industry is that, whether it's a bar, whether you're going to a golf club, whether you're going to a friend's house, everybody loves to talk about alcohol. They love to talk about what they've got in their drinks cabinet. They love to talk about what they're going to make, their special house cocktail. I was with some friends over the summer, and we created our own new drink, and we gave it a name. Of course, it was a fever tree based drink, but it's one of those things. It's part of the fabric of our lives and something that we all enjoy doing, and genuinely. Adds pleasure to people's leisure time, their relaxation time, and I think that's what's so unique about it. And therefore, it was an industry that also, certainly when I joined, it never took itself. It's a serious industry, but it didn't take itself too seriously. It's about how you make it fun, how you make it enjoyable, how you make it engaging, and I think those are the aspects that I sort of really gravitated to.
So, what was your first job out of the military in the spirits business?
So bizarrely, I went to a tobacco company for a very short period because they gave you the best training, I think, of any. You have to be well trained to sell cigarettes. And then bizarrely, a friend of mine who was working at the same company moved, and he went and worked for Bacardi in central London. And it was like, well, just a second, I now can work for a spirits brand, and I can be based in central London, and as opposed to working for a tobacco company and working about an hour outside London. So my social life improved, and the industry that I was in improved. And it was again a fascinating time because I was a European marketing manager, so I was traveling around Europe using my languages, speaking to people in different countries, and trying to get them to drink more Bacardi rum, when Bacardi was still a single brand company. So we're talking quite a long time ago, which probably ages me quite considerably, but it was a great business. And then Bacardi bought Martini and Rossi. And when they bought them, they wanted me to move to either Amsterdam or Bermuda or somewhere strange. And I was like, don't know if I want to go to Amsterdam. And Bermuda looked quite attractive, but then I realized that you never left. So I couldn't really go there in my late 20s. And such as the industry was in those days, it was such a sort of, gentleman's industry that, Bacardi almost arranged for me to get an interview at United Distillers, who took one look at me and sent me straight to Poland. Literally, I think my boss said to me, I think he said something along the lines of, Charles, you were in the army. I said, yes. He said, oh, so you'd be happy to go to Poland then? I was like, Okay, I didn't know that that was the precise link between those two things. But it was there that I got the chance to be involved in my first startup company. So it was myself, my boss, and a office manager, secretary who spoke English and Polish, and it was the three of us. And this girl came with me everywhere to talk so that I can converse and talk to the locals and set up, businesses. And yeah, we had the most extraordinary kind of 3-4 years living in Poland. Again, right at the beginning, right when the kind of first people were going into the market. So it was very entrepreneurial, and it was very much a work hard, play hard environment at that time.
Well, I think like even back then, UDV was such a small company. Like we looked at Diageo now and was like, oh my god, Diageo's a behemoth. But like back in those days, like it really was a startup. Like the early '80s, mid '80s, it was still a startup in most markets that it went to. Like it had a good stronghold, obviously in the UK and the outliers from there. But really, it was still such a small market. So you were in Poland for a while. For 4 years, UDF. Sorry, I keep saying UDF, UDV. Were you there when they progressed? I remember when I started my career, it felt like every other week UDV was changing its name because it started acquiring more things, and it evolved.
I think I worked for United Distillers, then I worked for UDV, then I worked for Guinness UDV, and then I worked for Diageo. So it was sort of every 6 months they sent you a new business card. You said, okay, fine, whatever.
I remember having like multiple business cards from the same rep, all with different titles.
Exactly. That's what life was like. And I spent 3 years there, but I did, I remember because Polish winters were hard, very hard. Like there was, months and months of sub-zero temperatures, and the supermarkets were pretty challenging. And so I was kind of pleading for a sunshine posting. So whatever you do to me next, send me somewhere where there's sunshine. And I was extraordinarily fortunate because they sent me to Australia. And they said, look, listen, you're a good, wild East frontiersman, but we need you to get a bit more discipline. So they sent me to go and look after Dan Murphy's and Woolworths in Australia, believe it or not. And that was my gig when I first arrived in Australia. And then I went to Perth, Western Australia, and ran their business there. And then I got involved in some really exciting stuff where we were evolving new RTDs and new configurations for RTDs. But most importantly, we actually started doing, and you'll appreciate this as an Australian, we started doing Bundaberg rum and cola on tap in Queensland.
I remember those days. I try and explain to people like Johnny Walker and ginger on tap, and you'd be able to buy jugs of it. You'd buy jugs and you sit there with your mates and you'd jugs. And I try to explain the RTD culture because in I don't think North America since COVID, you've started seeing canned cocktails and stuff like that. But RTD culture in Australia it's unto itself. It's
unbelievable. And there's brands that do RTD in Australia that don't do them anywhere else in the world. Many of them only do them in Australia. So it was a fascinating time. But actually trying to put Bundaberg rum and cola into a keg to sell it into the on-trade. And in Australia, they have that. Again, I think it's very uniquely Australian, but they ice the beer taps.
Mm-hmm.
So all the beer taps are just caked in about an inch of ice. And of course, that meant that the refreshment that you get from an Australian beer, is second to none because it's literally coming out at 2-3 degrees centigrade, whereas a beer in most other markets is coming out at 6-7 degrees, and the coldest you can get a spirit and mixer to in a glass is probably 9-10 degrees. So you increase the refreshment cues by these kind of iced taps, delivering this icy cold Bundy and cola, and it just slipped down the throat, and you didn't actually know what the hell you were drinking.
It was, the glycol systems that we have in Australia. I've never seen them anywhere else in the world.
No.
Anywhere else at all. So were you married at this time? Like, were you dragging your poor wife all over the world?
No, I stayed single until I was 40, believe it or not. And it was really the next chapter in the life where I left Diageo, and then I messed around in a wine business for a little while, which sadly came to an end at the same time as 9/11 because we were looking to export into the US. And then I heard on the grapevine, on the industry grapevine, that Moet Hennessy was going to establish a business in Australia. And I thought, oh, this sounds like fun. And I I stalked the guy who was going to be the managing director, CEO of Moet Hennessy Australia. I stalked him literally. He was coming down from Singapore. I'd learnt all about him, and he was this hot shot Moet Hennessy guy, a guy called Rob Remnant. And I was kind of looking, going, how the hell do I get in touch with this guy? And I'd send him letters and do this and do this. And eventually, I think persistence paid off, and I got to meet him. And we hit it off on day one. And just, you know, he brought me in to set up the team. So I started recruiting people, you know, coast to coast, bringing on board the entire sales organization, establishing all the relationships with, you know, the big retailers, and getting a fantastic team in place. And what's amazing about that team is that today, around the world, you know, there are still people from that team in very senior positions at Moet Hennessy, or who've left Moet Hennessy, like myself, and are in senior positions in other companies. And it's, you know, it's a source of huge pride when you say, my God, I recruited, you know, Andrew McLaren. Andrew McLaren now runs Moet Hennessy Australia. And you know, that's just fantastic that people have built a career off that startup. And Australia is just an amazing country to do that in, because everybody, you know, there's always the tall poppy syndrome and this, that, and the other. But everybody was like, wow, you've taken control. And they love you for the fact you take control and you get on and you do stuff. And just a phenomenal time to be there as well. Just a great time.
That would have been around about the time I started, like I was getting really into my cocktails. 2001, 2002 was like when I really started building in Australia at that time. This is all pre-social media. I always remind people pre-social media. Like this stuff wasn't easy to do. Like you had to buy books, and there was no YouTube. There wasn't a lot of web information about it, all this sort of stuff. I thought it was kind of insane and crazy.
Yeah. I mean, stalking somebody now is very easy through LinkedIn and social media, whereas stalking somebody in those days to try and get a job was really difficult. It was hard work. You actually had to try and find out a name and an address and this and that and the other. You couldn't just ping them on, you know, on the off chance. So it was quite
go to their LinkedIn profile and chase
correct. Send them a message out of hope, you know. So it was a real labor of love. But yes, that was when I met. That was where I met my wife. So she was part of the Moet Hennessy Australia startup team. You know, hugely talented young lady, and you know, we started seeing each other. Then I had to go and chat to the boss and say, look, listen, you need to be aware of that. And so things got moved around, and 3 or 4 months later, we got married and carried on working together. And bizarrely, you know, she still works for Moet Hennessy in a capacity here in the US today.
Wow.
So yeah, so having worked for them in Australia, then in Europe, and now here in the US.
So when did you take over Belvedere? Because I really want to get into you were at Belvedere before you went over to Fever Tree, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And so you did some amazing things with Belvedere.
Thank you.
I'm going to bring up CSR, but we're going to what made you make the move to Belvedere Vodka?
So the head of Moet Hennessy at the time came to me and looked at me and said, Charles, I'd like you to go and run a vodka business. I was like, what? He says, do I have to? I joined a champagne company. Yes, he said. So off I went. And that was it. I mean, it was like, look, Charles, we need somebody to come and approach this with a different mindset. And, you know, develop and build a brand that was essentially a US only business and make it into a global business. And I think that's, you know, if you say, what was your legacy at Belvedere? Of all the things, it was when I took over the brand, it was whatever it was, you know, almost all sold in the US. All the profit was coming from the US. Whereas when I left, the business was a global brand and a global business with a balanced, you know, sales and profit pool. And and we were doing some pretty big things on a global stage. So it was a great business to be involved in.
So how long were you with Belvedere?
9 years. So I started
Wow.
there in late 2008 and left in 2017.
Wow. And so like I've got the list in front of me. So you brought it to the US. The US, I find it crazy because I think people from the outside looking in see Belvedere and Diageo, these massive companies, and you have really just treated them like a brand new startup, as if they were your own babies, your own companies.
Yeah, I think but that's the great thing about the Moët Hennessy system, if you like, where you have a maison, a house, and as the president of the maison, you run the business globally, so you run it as your own business. And very quickly, I determined that we needed to move the headquarters, because the headquarters was in London. And I go, why on earth is the headquarters in London for this business? So we moved it from London to New York. And I always used to say, I always describe myself as as a Scotsman working for a French company, running a Polish vodka, married to an Australian and living in New York, which pretty much sums up my life. But I love the way that Moët Hennessy gives you this freedom as the president of the maison to make these decisions, to make big decisions about where the brand's going to be headquartered, how you're going to approach it. And I said, look, whatever happens, I have to get the brand, I have to succeed in the US, and I have to take the brand global. Well, my knowledge and experience was all global at that point and less in the US. So come closer to your biggest market, your biggest consumer base, and obviously where there's the most sort of global influence on bartenders and all the rest of it. So that was why we kind of moved it here. And then that gave us the platform. Again, I was running a blood time.
So while you were at Belvedere, let's have a look here. You did the James Bond film, obviously Spectre, which is a huge thing. How did you pull that off? Was it another one of those like business card from someone to connect someone to connect someone else?
I got to work with an extraordinarily talented team, and a lady called Nicola Stevenson introduced me to the Bond team. And then we ended up going to meet with Barbara Broccoli, who owns the franchise. And we went and met with them at their offices in London. And I spent probably an hour getting grilled by Barbara on where Belvedere was from, what it was about, why we should be working. No money, no talk about money or anything like that. It was all about, is this brand the right fit for my brand as James Bond? And it was one of the most terrifying meetings of my life. But somehow within that meeting, there was amazing chemistry, very clearly from the the roots of what Belvedere was, to the roots of James Bond. And I always say, James Bond is a man of style and substance, and Belvedere was a vodka of style and substance. The style being the beautiful bottle and the extraordinary innovation that we were able to do, and the substance being the Polish roots and the rye vodka and the zero additives, and the fact that Poland is the birthplace of vodka, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I always used to be proudly tell any Pole that I met that I was heading up Poland's leading luxury export. Nobody was ever able to disprove that, so I kept on saying it. But so that was a lot of fun. And then the amazing thing about a business like Moët Hennessy is the ability to execute that in 50 countries around the world. Bang, just like that. And so we got involved. We did special limited edition bottles, and we did, extraordinary events and activations. We did a bit of TV advertising featuring a Bond girl, the first Mexican Bond girl, and it was a phenomenal experience and an amazing opportunity to see inside, a brand that is so loved by its adorers. And remember, they produce a film once every 3-4 years, and sustains this extraordinary love. Quite a most amazingly iconic brand.
Did you get a chance to drive a DB1?
I got a chance to sit in one. Sadly, didn't get to drive. I was invited to go out and drive one, and I didn't get. The lady at Aston Martin said, "You must come and have a test drive. Must go for a test drive." I said, "Yeah." And it just never quite. The diaries never quite worked out.
So while you were at Hannah's Belvedere, you started the Red, the initiative of private sectors to fight AIDS. Now, CSR's talked about a lot now, and I think it's been talked. I think in the spirit industry, especially with non-drinking seedlip and the non-alcoholic distillates and stuff like that. CSR has become a big thing, especially like seedlip being brought into Diageo's incubator and that sort of thing. So it's obviously being taken seriously. But what sort of pushed you? Because you're obviously a dynamic leader with this sort of entrepreneurial spirit. What was this sort of movement towards CSR as it sort of got kicked off? It seems like everything you've always picked up when it comes to new companies and new products and stuff is always at the very beginning of like when stuff should happen. So what was the push for this corporate social responsibility movement with Belvedere Red?
I think it was there was a couple of drivers behind it. One was I was a bit tired of being asked for free vodka, and so what I found was that we were donating, so much vodka to parties and events and supporting this charity and this charity and this charity and this charity. And what we worked out was we were very charitable, but we actually stood for nothing because all we were doing was supporting other people's parties. So it was actually to say, well, look, listen, let's stop doing that. We need to stop that. And what we need to do is actually make a stand ourselves. And then we said, right, what do we want to do? How do we want to, put ourselves forward in that space? And it was like, well, how can we make a difference on a global basis? Because again, you're running a global brand. You're not running the local brand. You're running the global brand. So how do we make a difference on a global basis? And obviously the issue of, HIV and particularly HIV in Africa. And people always say, if you can fix it there, you'll fix it globally. And then we looked at Red. And when you look at Red, their brand fit with ours was great because it was about creativity. It was about, being ingenious. It was a different fundraising model, totally different fundraising model. And when, Red launched with, the Apple, iPod, the original iPod Red, now you can get every single new iPhone comes out in a red one. And they just had a really cool stable of dynamic, energizing. Nike did the red shoelaces at one stage. Very simple initiative, just red shoelaces. And I've still got in all my trainers, I've got red shoelaces because I just got a whole load of them at the time. Because it's a simple gesture. You just change one little behavior. You buy the red one versus this, and the company donates money. It's a brilliant initiative. And obviously there was various conversations that had to take place between us and the Red team, because HIV and alcohol, should you be doing it, shouldn't you be doing it? And fundamentally we all came down to the same conclusion, which is where real people have the conversation about things that matter to them in the world, it normally happens over a drink. You discuss politics, you discuss sport, you discuss fashion, you discuss world affairs, world events, climate change, whatever you're discussing, but you generally discuss it around the table over a drink or two. And we thought, well, no better place to put a bottle of Belvedere vodka into the middle of that discussion point. The other thing it allowed us to do was it really allowed us to engage with celebrities in a totally different way. Because suddenly what we could do is we could go and talk to a Lady Gaga, or we could go and talk to, a John Legend or an Usher, and we could ask them to come and help us support what we were doing and who we stood for as a brand, as opposed to, here's a big check to be an ambassador for my vodka.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we believe in. Do you believe in the same thing, and will you help us? And it was amazing that all those people I mentioned did so willingly and really, really kind of embraced and engaged, with what we were doing, and did, amazing events for us. And whether that was a private event, at Annabelle's in London with Lady Gaga releasing one of her new albums, which we featured around Red, whether it was Usher doing something on the eve of the Grammys in LA, it really gave us access to be able to, again, to use their mouthpiece to talk about the good that we were doing, and not just having them as, here's another celebrity vodka ambassador, which again was something that we wanted to do. And I'm glad you said you thought we were ahead of our time. I think we were a bit ahead of our time, maybe, with that one. But the thing that when I left Belvedere, that people say, what were you most proud of? One of the things that gave me the greatest source of pride was the fact that there were 42,000 HIV positive mothers who gave birth to healthy babies thanks to the drugs that Belvedere was able to provide. That's pretty cool to think that there's 42,000 kids in the world who were born thanks to the work that we did, and that that's something I'm really proud of.
So now we can finally actually talk about what we actually the interview was all about, was Fever Tree.
Yeah.
Again, obviously people who are listening are going to see this sort of repetitive pattern of this challenge and this okay, I'm going to take on another startup, and especially with the big move, like spirits themselves will always sort of sell themselves straight up. And as you said in the very beginning about the jaw drop and that sort of blank stare when they really start clicking, the wheels start clicking in the back of their heads, like, yeah, you're drinking Belvedere with off the gun tonic or off the gun soda, why are you doing this? Why are you paying $12 an ounce for off the gun soda? So how did that sort of come about? Were you looking for a new challenge? Because it seems like you're always rising, and then, okay, what's next?
Well, firstly, we'd done quite a bit of work with Fever Tree during my tenure at Belvedere. And so and in fact, at one stage fairly early on, I said, right, well, if Fever Tree is in the same market, whenever we do an event as Belvedere, we must always do it with Fever Tree so that our drinks taste good. I don't want our drinks tasting bad. Imagine being a spirits company and having bad tasting drinks at your party. That's a bit weird. It's like going to a Michelin starred restaurant and eating McDonald's. It just shouldn't happen. You know what I mean? So the chef serves you a whole load of Big Macs, not really what I came here for. So we'd done a bit of work with them, and they were talking. They obviously came to me, and I got to meet, and I think this was really important because the chemistry was critical. But I got to meet Tim Warrilow and Charles Rolls, who started the business, and we just got on extremely well, on a personal level. We believed in the same things. We were passionate about the same things. We care about the same things. And so, when they came to me and said, look, Charles, we'd love you to come and join our team. We're thinking about setting up a company in America. Would you be interested? And I just, yes, yes. Why? Because I believe in the opportunity and I believe in the brand. The opportunity is huge here. The brand is, phenomenal. The culture is really important to me. I think, this is the big differentiator. A lot of people talk about it. But I really believe that kind of the environment and the culture, and Tim and Charles both wanted, somebody who would come in and not be constrained by the big corporate, actually be free of that and go off and do stuff. And I think the other bit was it's just an exciting opportunity, an exciting business. And when you believe in something, it means that every day at work isn't it isn't a grind or anything like that. Every day at work is like, right, well, now, how do I get more people to believe in the same thing? And whether that's, the retailers, the bartenders, the media, or obviously the consumer, that's the excitement here,
And I think it's sort of as you said, that culture, that click, that when you first met them, like they basically started a company that most people would be like, well, but we've got tons of pop on the market. There's tons of soda on the market. Why would you want to make a premium mixer right now? Like, because it was ahead of its time. Now premium mixers are everywhere. Premium mixers are absolutely everywhere. So with Fever Tree, building on that, COVID hits, and I've looked some stats up, and I got some stats from online about how much Fever Tree blew up. And I've seen this just in my market, in the macro of like everybody's making sourdough, everybody's pickling, everybody's making jam or making, and then of course cocktails. And I know that here in Victoria we had a big Campari shortage at the very start of COVID because everybody was making Negronis at home. Were you expecting? Obviously, we're 8 months into a pandemic. Were you expecting the response to Fever Tree? Like, you've had massive Google searches, all this. Were you expecting the consumer behavior to change so drastically, so dramatically, so quickly?
Um, absolutely not. I think no. I think now, absolutely not. Because did we project this? No. But now, on reflection, does it surprise me? Absolutely not. And now you can't project it, because if you say, right, I'm going to wipe out, a business. In North America, US and Canada, about a third of our business was going through bars, restaurants, hotels, all those things. So you said, right, you're going to lose a third of your business and you're still going to grow. That's pretty tough. So, like everybody, I think we kind of said, don't think this is going to be a great time for us. But then what happened was we saw people transferring a lot of their on-trade behaviors to the at-home market. And to your point around home baking, home arts and crafts and all the rest of it, this formed a key part of that. And, I'm sure all of us have needed a drink once or twice during the last number of months. And I think the penny dropped as well, with people going into their local grocery store or liquor store or wherever they're buying, their mixers from, and going, well, you know what, I'll try something new. And I think this is where Fever Tree, again, has been brilliant with innovation. We're finding that our elderflower tonic water, our Mediterranean tonic water, our aromatic tonic water, those are the ones that are growing, faster almost than the whole portfolio. And why?
Wow.
It's because people are experimenting. They're going, well, I want to try and make myself a cocktail at home, but I don't have the confidence to pour the right amount of Saint-Germain in, or to do a lemon thyme syrup or something like that for myself. So I'll just use the Fever Tree that's already got lemon thyme in it, or it's already got some Angostura in it, or it's already got some elderflower in it. And they suddenly go, wow, that transforms that cocktail for me. And then when you look at what's happened in the spirits market, because clearly we're tied to we're tied pretty much to how that evolves. You've seen premium spirits have continued to grow. In fact, in many cases, they've accelerated their growth during lockdown, particularly tequilas and whiskey, and gin's done very well during lockdown as well. And how are people drinking those? Well, people are still looking for simple, long mixed drinks. When you're making a drink at home, you're wanting something that's simple. I can make it myself, because my choice is beer, wine, or spirit and mixer. Mm-hmm. And so it's got to be simple. It can't have 4 or 5 ingredients. And I was as guilty as everybody working for a spirits company, suggesting, right, now all you've got to do is a 6-step, 7-ingredient cocktail. Like, nobody's ever going to make it. Whereas you make a simple long mixed drink, you're getting something that's refreshing because it's long. You're getting something simple, and yet suddenly, because you're using a flavored tonic water or a flavored ginger ale, you're getting 2 or 3 extra ingredients coming into it. So actually, you are making a cocktail. And I think that has been, that's been absolutely at the core of why we've seen the growth that we've seen during this period. And, Canada, equally as strong. The business in Canada is doing amazingly well for exactly the same reasons. The business in the US, you quoted some of the numbers, but, our reported growth in the first half of the year was plus 39%. Very strong growth, So Exciting times ahead.
Yeah, so my favorite drink at work right now, I've got it on the menu, is just a Verna Amaro and lemon tonic.
Yeah, delicious.
A Verna Limoni. Um, so that pushes it to, like when the sort of that first conversation you had when COVID hit, because as you can see, like as we've been talking about, like retail and the consumer, that's blown up, but then you've got this very hard hit hospitality industry, and we've had lots of bar closures and a lot of lockdowns and open up again and lockdowns. And I know I talked to a lot of different brands and different brand heads just about how you sort of approach it, because you can really make it, you can make it tasteless if you do certain things when the industry is all shut down. Like a lot of people have talked about that with award ceremonies and stuff like that. Like, why are we giving awards out to bars that maybe closed in 2021? How did you sort of approach that? Because obviously consumers blew up, everybody's making drinks at home, everybody's loving life. How did you approach the bartender side of things?
We the first thing we did was we said we want them. We want to give them meaningful things to do, and from our perspective. So, in fact, if you go onto our Instagram or look at any of our little, vignette type videos, we use bartenders to make drinks and show people how to make a great tasting drink at home. And we actually got bartenders, appear in videos and obviously paid them to do so. We actually got them doing their métier. What was amazing was that, they were doing these things on their iPhones in their homes with their own, and you go, my God, you've got all that stuff at home? I feel a bit embarrassed. I don't have any of that stuff. But what you really got an insight into was not only how to make a great tasting drink, but also just how passionate these people are in the fact that their home bar is probably as sophisticated as their bar at work, as it were. So that was really important to us, was to sort of find ways to engage the community and to do things with them. Secondly, as bars have been opening up and down, I said we've certainly in New York, which you can imagine was very, very hard hit. But then as New York started to reopen and the whole summer terrace and sort of patio thing has evolved, and the streets of New York look, I think, as close to Paris as they ever will at the moment, with the amount of sort of outdoor dining. But, we've been doing umbrellas and, what can we help you with? How can we help you? We've built these pop-up bars. Again, marketing team had done an amazing job to sort of build these little pop-up bars that people can wheel outside their bar to serve people out on the street and to help them. And then obviously we've been finding ways to support, local bartender, community and effort, with some financial support. But I think as much as financial support is clearly critical, I think engaging people and talking to them and giving them things to do has been probably as important. And those cement relationships, I hope, in the medium and longer term, because we were absolutely there for people, but absolutely also, we've been giving them, things to do, which I think is so critical.
So what's the plan for the next 6 months? I know that obviously, who was I talking to the other day? Talking to another brand the other day, and I was like, so how has that been? Like, because most marketing teams and that sort of thing are thinking 2 years ahead, and they're sort of backcasting from that. And right now, no one can really think what's going to be like in 2 years. What's the immediate plan for the next 6 months?
I think, God love, I think we're, undoubtedly our life is going to be somewhat dictated by what happens with the virus and what happens with opening or openings and closing. I think what you can predict for the next 6 months, and particularly for the winter, is going to be it's going to be lumpy, and I think therefore trying to be as consistent as we possibly can be is really important during a kind of lumpy period with bars opening, closing, opening, closing. I think the other thing that we did during lockdown that we're going to continue to do, which is, keep talking to people. The number of bits of business that we've been able to pick up because our sales team never stopped calling on, maybe not physically calling on, but contacting the bars, contacting the hotels, contacting. So I think staying close, staying in touch, finding innovative solutions like the to-go kits. That was another great thing, these to-go kits, and we created little pack, carrier bags, so you could buy half a bottle of this and 2 or 3 mixers, and get that as a to-go thing, or to-go cocktail ideas. People use our 500ml bottles, unscrew the top, take out a bit of ginger beer, stick a bit of spirit and a couple of other things in, screw it back up. Here you go. Here's your to-go cocktail. So more and more of those kind of things. I think absolutely staying at the forefront of those and scaling those wherever we can. That's absolutely critical. I think, no doubt we're all going to be, sadly, probably addicted to our screens even more during the next period. So how do we find ways to continue to engage, bartenders and engage the trade, engage consumers through, that very simple thing of how to make a great tasting drink at home. And I think most importantly is stay focused on the opportunity in the future. And for us, we've got a great future, and this business was always going to have a rapid acceleration at some stage, because as more and more people get that simple idea into their head of, if 3/4 of your drink is the mixer, the more it's going to take off. And I think it's really exciting that people are doing it at home, so they're actually going to be walking into their local bars going, oh yeah, I know Fever-Tree, I've been having it at home for the last 6 months, and all the rest of it, which is only going to help the bartender, because they're going to go, great, well, I've got Fever-Tree and I love Fever-Tree. So I think it's there's a great opportunity for us here.
So I don't want to take up much more of your time, but you've done. Obviously, everybody who's listening has heard such an amazing story. 30 years in the industry. One last question: what do you hope your legacy is going to be? Like, obviously, you're not slowing down anytime soon. So, what do you feel is going to be your legacy as Charles Gibb?
Well, well, as Charles Gibb, that's a very different thing. No, I think, look, in this role, I hope, I think the legacy we want to create as the sort of founding members of Fever-Tree North America is to change, is genuinely to say we change the way people drink their spirits in North America. That would be a pretty cool legacy for all of us as a family. And we talk about the Fever-Tree North American family. But we do. I mean, that's what we want to do. We want to genuinely have a legacy of having changed the way people consume in this market, these two countries, and that would be a very cool thing to have done.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, Charles. It was amazing chatting to you. It was just great. It was a great conversation, just about everything. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. Shawn,
Cheers.
absolutely.
Thanks a lot. I'll chat to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.